Hello there. I'm Rob Hudson. I'm a member of the law firm Frost Brown Todd, and I'm a volunteer with the Northern Kentucky Bar. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the NKBA Legends series. In this series, we interview distinguished Northern Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati lawyers, and we hope to help elevate the profession with a particular focus on what it takes to succeed as an attorney, both professionally and personally. Today's program will be recorded. It'll be made available to help guide the next generation of lawyers in our region. For the live attendees today, we appreciate your attendance. Be sure to post your questions in the Q&A or chat features, and I'll ask some or all of them at the end of the program. Today's another big day for our series. We're joined by one of Northern Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati's most successful, most influential attorneys, Margo Grubbs. If you know Margo, you know why she's been successful. I think Margo is like a force of nature in a very good way. As you interact with her, she's has this remarkable, clear vision of who she is and her approach to the practice of law and to serving the community. So we're going to learn more about these things and other attributes that have helped Margo along a remarkable path to success. As some additional background about Margo, she's the managing partner of Grubbs and Landry. She's held several high-level leadership posts in our region and in the state. President of the Salmon P. Chase American Inn of Court. She served on the Kentucky Bar Association Board of Governors. She's chaired the IOLTA Board of Trustees, all the while becoming an effective advocate for the LGBTQ plus community by, for example, helping to steer groups such as Stonewall Cincinnati. Margo, thank you so much for being a part of our Legends program, and welcome today.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that introduction, and to be quite frank, I was quite honored to be asked to be in this program, and so it's quite interesting to be able to talk to a lot of people. I can't see you guys on the gallery. And as you all know, whenever I do some CLE programs for the Bar Association, stuff like that, I always like to be able to see your faces and know who's there, because I just have grown accustomed to your faces, and I'm very appreciative that you're my friends and colleagues. So I'm very thankful and very honored.
Well, terrific. Let's start at the beginning, as we typically do with these programs, talking about early influences that sort of helped lay the groundwork for your decision to practice law.
Okay. Well, as I've thought about how the whole thing starts, to be quite frank, I wanted to be a PE teacher, and Northern Kentucky University didn't have a PE program. And about that time, which was in the mid 70s, I graduated from Northern Kentucky University in August of 1974. Starting teacher salaries was about $6,500, and right next door to the bookstore, which I had a part-time job, was the Northern Kentucky College University Public Safety Police Department. So I went over there. I heard they were hiring and found out they had a starting salary the same as teachers. So I thought, well, I think I'll do that. So as I got involved with public safety and police at NKU, I went to the police academy at Eastern Kentucky University in July of 1975. So our program was the same as all other law enforcement officers in the state of Kentucky, except for the state police. And Kentucky State Police had a 16-week program, and everybody else had a 10-week program at EKU. So I got into the policing, and then didn't take me very long, because think about it, in 1974, I was going to be 22 years old. I decided that at some point I wanted to be the chief of police, and I knew that wasn't going to happen because girls couldn't be the chief of police back in the mid 1970s. So I went to law school, because the public safety or the public administration program at Xavier, which was a night program, was going to take me 3 years. So if I was going to be in school for 3 years, I thought, well, maybe I'll just go to law school. That's how I got into law school, because I did not have any ambition to be a lawyer. I just wanted to be the chief of police.
Were there early job experiences or any I guess maybe even simply through the law enforcement positions that you held that maybe helped you ultimately to in your practice of law, or helped forge your identity or character?
Right. I mean, I don't know about identity and character, but the reality was, yes, the law enforcement background helped tremendously, because what ended up happening to me at NKU, we ended up having we had some sex offense cases that I ended up working. And then we had a huge stolen computer case that we worked. And that case allowed me to get introduced to the Cincinnati Police Department. And I worked with some detectives in we actually ended up recovering the computers. Now, some of you kiddos that are on here don't realize this, but computers were like monstrous back then. They weren't like little laptops and iPads. I mean, they were like big things. They had to use the dollies to get them out. They broke into one of the buildings, and NKU only had like 2 or 3 buildings at the time, and they hauled them out in the middle of the night. But when I went to Cincinnati Police Department here, I learned that they had actually, detectives. I got to go on a death scene because I just happened to be with him that day we were investigating, and he got called out on a death scene. Of course, for some of you who know, I grew up in the funeral home business. Chambers and Grubbs Funeral Home are my people. And I was not disturbed by the death scene. And I also learned that they had an intelligence department at the Cincinnati Police Department where they literally were taking photographs of NKU professors who were members of the Communist Party back then. So I got to see, they had dossiers. I don't make this stuff up, people. I'm just telling you, these are my experiences. I couldn't believe they actually had, it was the SDS, if you all remember, Students for Democratic Society. They had meetings at UC, and they had photographs of NKU professors. I mean, I was floored. So I learned a lot about it when I was at NKU. And then I was very fortunate that Frank Trusty, who was the Commonwealth attorney in Kenton County, hired me as a Commonwealth detective, because I had met him on the board of the Northern Kentucky Rape Crisis Center, which was a brand new organization that literally was helping as a founder of the Women's Crisis Center in the future. And I ended up getting to know Frank, and I knew Steve Cassidy and Alma Pusiger from back in those days. And our first executive director we hired Roxanne Qualls. So back in the day of things were changing dramatically for women in law enforcement and in the law, that we were finally getting accepted into the mainstream. For some of you young people, and I hear Becca Sheehan is on this little program today. Hi, Beck. In early 1970s, women couldn't even have credit cards in their own name. Think about that. I was married in 1969. I went to Boone County High School, and Johnny and I got pregnant with my son, Tony Miller, and we had to get married. And I was married for like 4 years. And back then, I couldn't even get credit. Think about it. It's hard to say in today's world because things have changed dramatically. We ended up in a little custody battle. And because I had come out of back in the day, LGBTQ, whatever those initials were, we didn't have them. And probably more so I was a B than I was a G, but I didn't know. So I lived a lifestyle pretty much of G. And I was closeted back then. I couldn't have been hired by the Cincinnati Police Department or the Kentucky State Police because I would have been put on a polygraph and asked if I was a homosexual, and I wouldn't have been hired. And so things were very, very discriminatory, and that's how my life was. And I had to be very cautious. I had friends who were teachers who knew that if they had come out, they would have lost their jobs. And they were single women primarily, and they needed their employment. I was blessed. Tom Smith was one of my mentors of life, as was Steve Wallenczak. Those guys took a risk on me in 1981 and said, well, let's say that the rumors we hear about Margo are true. Do we want to hire her anyway? And I got blessed and they hired me. So that was my really first big job, because Gail Hoffman's daddy had hired Gail and I both out of law school. So we started there. If it hadn't been for my colleagues and the people who knew me and people who ended up liking me, because I'm a little on the tenacious side, to be quite frank. I mean, I've always been a pusher, I guess, because I needed to protect my son, Tony Miller. I got hired, and I got blessed with great mentors along the way. So the discrimination was there. It hurt me terribly at different times in my life. I couldn't, I don't wallow, so I'm not a wallower, but I ended up using the steps and the friendships that I built to move forward to help people. So then when I got out of law school, I went right into trying cases because I had experience as a police officer and law enforcement officer. And so that's kind of like how it all came about.
Well, and you were mentioning mentors. Who were those early mentors, and what did they do to help you out? I understand they provided you with opportunities, but probably more to it than that. Maybe specific things you recall that were pivotal moments. I know I have a couple of them in my background with early mentors. What were some of those experiences, Margo?
Well, at NKU, we had a chief by the name of Bill Ward, who was very helpful. By the time I left NKU PD to go to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office as a detective, I was a lieutenant in the administration there. So I was literally mentored by Chief Ward. When I got to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, Frank Trusty was one of my mentors. Bob Sanders was first assistant, and Harry Hellings was second assistant, and Alma Fusiger was third. So all three of them mentored me as a detective, and Kelly Lynn, who was our chief detective, and Jack Denham, all of those people played a large portion in helping me learn about, integrating into the criminal justice system and how it all worked. I'll never forget the first trial I ever sat with was with Frank Trusty. It was a TV theft case. Judge Melvin Stubbs was the first division judge. And a young man was on the witness stand, and there was an alibi defense, and he cussed. He said, I'll never forget it. And Frank Trusty was questioning him and said, well, what were you all doing at your house if this defendant was with you? And he goes, oh, well, we were just in the kitchen. He goes, well, what were you all doing in the kitchen? And they said, well, we were just sitting around the kitchen table bullshitting. Well, all of a sudden the hammer went down from Judge Stubbs. He said, Mr. Murphy, hold the witness right there, counsel in chambers. I didn't even know what chambers were. I had no idea. That meant go back into the office back behind the courtroom. And all of a sudden, as soon as we got in there, everybody lit up a cigarette. So it was like a smoke-filled haze in this back room chambers in Judge Stubbs's chambers. And he was so angry that man had cussed in his courtroom. He said, Mr. Willenborg, Tom Willenborg was a young man. He said, you tell your witness that I want to see him. And he brought him in, he chewed him out, and he said, and you're going to spend the rest of the afternoon in jail, sir, for cussing in my courtroom. That was my first trial experience.
Things have changed a little bit.
Oh my gosh, now they wear short shorts and tank tops to court. I mean, it's like craziness. But yeah, seriously, that was my first trial experience. And then my second one, when I tried a case, it was a car theft case, and I was a public defender appointee because we had a roster system back then. It was 6 months out of law school. I'm in Judge Dunn's court, and I knew Judge Dunn and Judge Galise and Judge Goodnow. I mean, I knew all of them as a detective because you'd have to have warrants signed periodically. So I'm pacing in Judge Dunn's chambers. He goes, Margo, what's wrong with you? And I went, I'm really scared. I'm really nervous. And he goes, well, what are you scared of? And I said, because I don't know when to object. He goes, I'll look at you long and hard if you need to object. That means that object. I'll look at you long and hard. I won't let that happen to you. I said, okay, sir. But it all went fine. My guy got a misdemeanor conviction. So I got to be on a roll of the public defenders. And that's how basically us young lawyers learned how to try cases, because we all were in court regularly trying felony cases. And then I kind of graduated into the bigger ones, rape, robbery, murder, run over by the bus.
Well, and so many of us are focused in one particular practice area to the exclusion of all others. And on the other hand, you've had some varied experiences through the years. How did all of that sort of develop? Was it kind of organic, or did you have a plan?
Oh, no. Rob, I don't think I've ever had a plan. My only plan is that I truly always have believed that being a lawyer is a calling. I think it's something that we're called to do, and I think helping people is what we're meant to do, not only to be in service to God, but in service to others. And that's truly my heart. But the plan was, I'm trying cases because I'm trying to earn money, number one. And I don't think I ever thought of it any other way than that's just what I was supposed to do. Because we had a public defender roster system, Bob Karen would run the system, and he'd just call you up and say, I got some cases for you. Now, I was with Tolliver Smith, Wallensack, and Schachter at the time. The civil guys would try cases in teams, but I seemed to always get Margo, go down and try that rape and robbery case by yourself, because I didn't have a team. I just had me. And I ended up getting involved in bigger cases. So by the time, manslaughters and murders came about, then I learned medicine. And you have to learn pathology or the nature and extent of injuries and things like that in a basically assault cases and things like that. I figured, well, when I left Phil Tolliver's office, and that was in late 86, I bought my first building and started practicing out in Florence, which is where I'm from. And I figured I could try a personal injury case. So I just kind of graduated. And as I said, Tom Smith has always been a mentor of mine, and he did defense insurance. So if things got really hairy or questions came up, I could always, ask him or Steve Wallensack or Paul Schachter to help me. And they were always there for me. So.
Well, as a newer lawyer, one of the things we focused on in this series is how to develop practice proficiency, the commitment that it takes to get there. And if you could share with us some of your views about how, and I'm not trying to embarrass you, how you became a truly excellent, extraordinary lawyer.
Thank you for this kind words. I had help. I mean, at every turn, if I think about it, in 1969, if you get pregnant and you're 16 years old, okay, and you still have a year left in high school, how do you get through it? You get through it with the love and help and support of people that care about you. And then when you are going into law enforcement, knowing that if someone finds out about your lifestyle, that you could be destroyed. And there were some people that tried to hurt me. You had to have the love and support of people around you to help you overcome that. In the law practice, I was blessed with people in my life that always I could turn to for love and support and help to teach me the things that I didn't know. And I was blessed with Tolliver Smith, Wallensack, and Schachter, because think about it, Phil Tolliver was like super lawyer, and so was Tom and Steve and Paul. They all had learned with Phil. So we all learned, and then they helped me learn. And then Bob Hoffman, Gail Hoffman, and Jim Parsons, they're my law school classmates, Gail and Jim are, but Bob Hoffman knew everything. He had a very big general practice. So he could tell us how to do everything, Now, he didn't tell me about going and kicking in somebody's door back in the trailer park that husband was beating the hell out of her. But Gail and I went and did that and got her stuff out because she was beat up bad. But I don't think we're supposed to do that now. But back then, we got her out. But we learned through our associations in the Women's Crisis Center. We learned with United Appeal. I mean, I look back, I was, 42 years is a long time. So I look back and thought how many things I was involved with. I mean, it's crying out loud. I was on the Attorney General's Task Force for Domestic Violence before domestic violence was even a law, on the Crime Prevention Subcommittee, the Kentucky Commission on Women. I mean, I just integrated in community involvement. And then community involvement ends up building we called it business origination back in the day, but now you all call it business development. And young lawyers have to get involved with old lawyers like us, to help them, because they're going to run into problems. Pete Gullett and I taught money traps for young lawyers for about 9 years with the bar, to try to help young lawyers not fall in a money trap or fall in an ethical situation and then not how to get out of it. So it's that involvement with others in our community, our colleagues, our friends, that you surround yourself with. And when I look back in life, I can't believe the network of people that have helped me. Without them, I wouldn't be where I am. But I always believe that, for instance, the Michael Funk case, Deanna Dennison and I tried Michael Funk trial on the Jenny Isles murder. That man did not kill that little girl. But we had to save him because the police believed, and they still believe today, he killed that little girl. And so things like that just kind of always got dropped in my path, and either I could walk around it and ignore it or whatever, but my heart would never let me do that. So we were 8 weeks in trial, on trial number 2, where he was found, we had a mistrial, 11-1 for acquittal. And then trial number 3, 5 more weeks trial, where he was finally acquitted. Why does this happen? I don't know. It just does.
The decision to leave, a somewhat larger firm and start your own firm must have been a big one. What considerations went into that, and what challenges came with it?
Well, one of my favorite sayings is, I don't take kindly to people telling me what to do. So that generally is what figured into it, is because
we have that in common, Margo.
Yeah. So I usually would get into a situation of just disagreeing in reference to maybe how money got split, because I never did feel like I wanted to fight about money, and I always thought the boys always would fight about money. I just was comfortable enough that I didn't have to make a fortune. I bought real estate in Covington. That was really my retirement. So, and I lost a lot of it in the restaurant business, as a lot of y'all know. I just thought that I would take a case because someone needed help, and just because they couldn't pay was no big deal. If they could pay a little bit, maybe they could trade some services or something like that. It was more important to me to help them out of the jam that they were in, rather than, be able to bill out big bucks and stuff. I would have never fit in downtown Cincinnati. I mean, I did have a big office, thank God. Dick Lawrence and his family gave me an opportunity, and I was with them a couple years, had the big office looking over the river. It was pretty spectacular. But at the same time, I just had my own way of doing things. So going out was scary the first time, but after, that was in 1987, I shared space with Sarah Sidebottom, who is my dear friend who's gone for now, and Janelle Marks-Berry. And we just we did what we were doing to help others. And then I went to the big law firm for a while, and then I left again and went out on my own. And I just always figured that it'll be okay. And it is.
And it is.
And now I'm old. Now I'm old and I'm comfortable enough. And I have wonderful people I practice law with, Jennifer Landry, and I've got 2 wonderful paralegals and a nice receptionist. We're up here in the Huff building sharing space with Tommy Rouse and Kevin Mosier and Ruthie Cleet and Phyllis Montel, and everything's good.
What do you think were some of the big successes, for example, a trial success or something along those lines, as your practice developed? And you may have already referenced 1 or 2 of them. But.
Well, yeah, I think early on it was just usually the cases of whatever the public defender cases that would, you'd get sent. Well, I ended up getting some, the Cub Scout leader that molested boys. I get the football coach down in Ludlow. For some reason, I got to start doing sex offense cases. And I always think that was too because of the task force on sex offense that we started with the Women's Crisis Center. I mean, kind of developed that way. So I ended up then getting on the opposite side of defending, and long before there was a sex offender registry, to be quite frank. And then I had a really big case in front of Judge Bertelsmann back in, it was one of his very first cases. It was a gambling conspiracy case. And it was a federal gambling conspiracy case. And I learned about bookkeeping and, or booking, a book operation or whatever. I mean, it was just incredible. And then as I went on, I ended up handling Stephen O'Banion's civil case. He was the gay man that was assaulted by the Cincinnati Police Department over in the crosswalk. And that's about when HIV and AIDS was a big thing in the late 80s, I guess. And that was a big case for civilly that I had. And we actually settled for money in the Cincinnati PD paid money, but the Hamilton County Sheriff's got off. And you can imagine the voir dire in that case was about, gay man, AIDS, police brutality. I mean, it was a pretty big case, actually. I had a very big verdict over in Cincinnati, almost $1 million on a man that lost both of his legs due to frostbite on a failure to diagnose frostbite in the jail when he went in with hypothermia. Never offered to settle. It was in Judge Ruhlman's court. And the morning of trial, Judge Ruhlman goes, "Are you guys going to settle?" And defense says, "Nope, we're not offering them nothing." They never offered us anything. Of course, the morning of trial, we would have probably taken a small amount because we didn't have a whole lot of lost wages and stuff. But it was a $975,000 verdict.
Wow.
I had a big case on a fire that burnt down to the ground. And I was helping Mike Baker and Debbie Pleatman on that case when I was at Ziegler and Schneider. And it became a bad faith case because the insurance company had denied that there had been any policies and procedures concerning claims management. And we ended up, I remember the deposition, I'm up in Minnesota with Debbie Pleatman, and we're sitting in this conference room, and all, the claims judge saying, "No, we don't have any policies and procedures on claims management and the stuff." And I looked over and there was a book right on the shelf, and I went over and pulled the book down and I handed it to, I said, "Doesn't this say claims management and procedure textbook?" And I handed it to them, and they settled that case the morning of trial for $975,000. So there have been some big cases on issues that have been odd. I usually always get odd cases. How about this? Union activities at Domino's Pizza. 2 truck drivers are driving down the road. They were 6'5". These were the biggest men. And I'm not I always thought I was 6 foot tall, but I'm not. But I'm this little girl and these 2 big guys. They heard a voice telling them their tractor trailer had been rigged with a wiretap. And sure as crap, it had been. They found the tape recorder. I'll never forget Don Stepner saying, he was defending one of the defendants, saying, "Margo, this is the stupidest case I ever saw." And I went, okay, well, $250,000 later, they settled the case. So, I mean, it was always something odd, but helping somebody who had been wronged. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
Well, what do you think were the keys to the success of your practice developing through the years and growing? And you've referred to relationships, people who helped you, but in my business, for example, there's a fairly well understood way of developing business. There's a certain track. It sounds like yours was probably a little more varied.
Yeah, I can't say that I've done anything specifically. I mean, I was thinking about that because you and I talked about it the other day in our pre-interview interview. Did you know they do that, guys? Pre-interview interviews. I don't know, other than the fact that some of my cases came to me as a brand new lawyer because people were waiting for me to get out of law school. They just go, "Oh, I was waiting for you to get out of law school." So it was kind of like people that knew me. Then after I tried a few cases, and I would, I always interview people and say, after trials, I always would talk to the jury. I'd say, "Well, how did you think we did?" "Oh, well, Ms. Grubbs, we thought you did a great job," and things like that. So I'd always try to get feedback from the jury. Well, then I would interview a client coming in. They go, "Oh, I was on your jury." I was like, "Oh, okay." Now I can't even remember all the cases I've tried because I was trying to think the other day about how many cases I've tried over my 42 years. And I want to think I've probably been in a courtroom a year or 2 years out of my 42 years, if you put it all together back to back. But people just come because you take care of other people. So when they say, even today, if you like go out on Facebook and they say, well, we need a lawyer for such and such and such and such, generally speaking, my name comes up on the comments 1 or 2 or 3 times or whatever. And if I'm lucky, I'll get one of those. But I was involved, community endeavors. I mean, people I would go to church with, or, I would sing. I mean, a lot of these people that have been in the galley before on the district bar and stuff, I usually sing a song at the end. I would sing. I would get involved with Stonewall Cincinnati was a big one, although I probably didn't have one of the biggest LGBTQ practices, but I had my fair share because that river's pretty wide. It just people that know people, and I don't know. I mean, why do people come to you as a lawyer? I don't know, other than they think that they'll get taken care of. As a friend of mine said, handle it. Get it handled, Margo.
Being empathetic and kind and proficient at the practice of law, probably the most efficient way to develop a practice. Having it happen organically rather than artificially. And it sounds like that was a big key for you. You've talked a little bit about community service. What are your views on, what we lawyers should be trying to do to help our community, whether we should be involved or whether we should just be in our offices, typing away and being on the phone?
I don't believe lawyers should be in their office typing away. Lawyers in olden days were community leaders. And I think what happens to all of us, I mean, and I do think it's I think a lot of it's personality driven, because some people are shy. So they might not fit in the courtroom sphere. And that's what their choices are, because it's just an uncomfortability. They just never wanted to be that kind of lawyer. So, and not everybody can do it. And I think when you're looking at your own personality, you want to adapt to the community that you can serve, because I definitely think lawyers are leaders in the community. Some people don't even know that my great-great-grandfather was a circuit judge in Boone County, Sidney B. Gaines. And that was when I had to travel a circuit. My grandmother is Mary Grubbs Highway. I mean, Mary Scott Chambers Grubbs was my grandmother, the first woman embalmer in the state of Kentucky in 1925. I have people in my family that had been involved in leadership types thing. My mother ran the life squad and was the chief, assistant chief of the life squad. My daddy was a funeral director, and we buried people. My family still buries people. So the question is, when people are looking at lawyers, that lawyers, doctors, accountants, professionals were the businessmen in Boone County. I don't think there was a woman that served back then. I'm not kidding. But I mean, they were the leaders. So yes, I believe that lawyers must give to their communities and be involved as leaders in their communities, because number one, if we don't uphold the rule of law, we are all in trouble. Our democracy is based on the rule of law. So I am very politically involved and have been forever and ever. So yes, I think you must be a participant, and that also helps in business development. But if you're not the kind of lawyer that's a participant, then be a visual participant, then be the kind of lawyer behind the scene that helps those that are, because it will come back in spades to you.
Well, what were some of your favorite opportunities to serve? Different experiences you had?
Well, Phil Tolliver, Tom Smith, and particularly Steve Wallenczak would push me in the bar leadership. I'll never forget, Steve helped me in bar leadership. He goes, Margo, get involved. Okay. So I did. I mean, the very first subcommittee I was ever on for the Bar Association was specialization. You see where that's gone. That been like early 1980s. But then I got involved with the IOLTA board. There was a vacancy. And so Steve asked me if I would get involved with the bar on the IOLTA. And then I got involved with IOLTA. And then I was chair of IOLTA. And then I became on the Bar Foundation. a life fellow of the Bar Foundation. And then there was a vacancy that came up on the Board of Governors. Now, mind you, this was probably, I'm thinking it was like 2002, I think, because I know I had the restaurant at the time. I got elected. Now, I had already had my little feelings hurt over the family court judgeship out in Boone County, where I came out of the Judicial Nominating Commission #1, but I did not get it. And will always believe it was because of my lifestyle issues. And there was no way they were going to put a lesbian on the family court bench in in whatever that year was, 2001 or 2 or whatever. Wasn't going to happen. So I'm not too much of a softie from the persona that most of you know, but that hurt. That one hurt me really bad. But when I got elected to the Board of Governors by my peers, I was very flabbergasted and very honored. And I mean, it got me because I just didn't think it was a possibility, because too many hits had come, too many hits. And I always got over the hits. And none of these people that are listening here today even probably know the half of the hurts, but I got over them. But that was probably a star of my life. And it was an honor to serve for 6 years, because it's how to help lawyers do their very best and be their very best, and to hold the community ideology of what we lawyers are. We're good people. We give so much of ourselves. And that was probably this one of the stars of my life. And that was a very important thing.
As we talked, you mentioned your faith once or twice during this program, and during our pre-interview, I was sharing with you how if someone invited me to participate in some community activity, what I would think about that. And I loved your comment on that, how you chose opportunities, or how they chose you, and how you viewed it. And it leads me to just a broad-based question, and I hope you'll forgive me for asking it if it offends you in some way, but if you could share a little bit about the role of your faith and how it's impacted your relationships and your practice of law through the years.
I grew up in the Florence Christian Church, which was a little white church at the intersection of 42 and 25 in Florence, across from the Kentucky Grill, and sang in the church choir. Went to Sunday school, just walked next door. And I always have been a believer. A Christian believer, but I've also believed that God is a divine thing in our world, probably our universe. And over the course of time, I went through a time period of, I think we all go through time periods in our personal lives of desperation, when the hurt becomes such that you just can't even fathom how you're going to get through it. And I had a couple of, and then the one word that I am so ashamed of is agnostic, because when I said to myself one time in my life that I was agnostic, I was very, very, I'm just shameful of that time period in my life, because another time period came in my life where I had a partner that got pancreatic cancer at 23 years old and died at 24. And going through that in my life brought me back to my faith in God, and it's never left me after these 30 some odd years. So my faith, and I go to a little white church down in Bromley Christian Church now, and Tony and I have been down there for a long time. And I think that my faith has helped guide me, because cases that have come to me where other people wouldn't take them. You know what I mean? It's just like, they're just so odd. There's no money to be made, or whatever the reasons were. I just took them. And I just think that's a big part of my faith. And I believe that it's, I think it's not, I think that it's a calling, and I just think it's been very much part of my life. And I always say, right now we're having a struggle with this whole Christian nationality division and things like this. And I always just say, what would Jesus do? Well, I know he'd be right next to me. And I think I think one God for all people. I mean, I'm just inclusive. I think everyone is able to be faith-based in wherever they are in their place in life. And that would probably give them peace. And so right now it's almost 70 years old. I want peace, and I want peace for others.
Yeah,
So it's important.
That wonderful response. And what I was struck by when we talked was, I would tend to be more analytical about any opportunity and whether it would fit within, certain aspects of my life. And it sounded like your reaction to opportunities, be it a case that maybe some people wouldn't think is so desirable, or some additional volunteer opportunity on top of the other three that you've taken, at the time, your reaction was, this is where God wants me to go. I thought I think that I like your analysis process a little better than mine and in the practice of law. And so now we're moving on, Margo, to professional responsibility directly. We've talked about practice excellence and practice development, and I think honorable, ethical ways to do all of those things. But as to some more direct questions with respect to professional responsibility, and with your experience and background, what do you think are some of the more risky areas, for a trial lawyer or for a lawyer in domestic relations and your other practice areas through the years?
Well, I think one of the things that young lawyers need to be aware of, and to be quite frank, when I became a new lawyer, it was not something that was focused on hardly at all. I mean, I don't think we even took that professional responsibility component of the bar back in 80 that I can recall. But reading the Supreme Court rules is number one, that everybody should read them and know them, and then, of course, try to follow them. That does not mean that we are not human. But to be quite frank, in today's society, one of the things that we must strive to do is tell the truth. And we as lawyers know that truth perception can be a variety of different things, okay? But facts are facts are facts. And so I am like hell-bent on getting to the bottom of whatever any claim is. And I kind of have done this from the very beginning. When an incident occurs, you got to go back as a lawyer, if you're particularly going to try the case, and find out where the information came from in the first place. What's the allegation against somebody, and how did it come to fruition? And then build from that what was seen, heard, and observed about that factual situation at the time it occurred. Not what you think, not what you wish, but what actually happened. That's your ethical responsibility. And I'll tell you one thing that just floored me when I switched over from criminal, because criminal law, I always said, was trial by ambush. You didn't know from day to day what was going to come out of the mouth of a witness, because you're not allowed, you weren't getting witness statements, or they would hand you the witness statement right before they testified. Well, I mean, you can't even read it. So I was all prepared for trial by ambush. But when I got into the civil realm, I was floored by how it was seek and find, hide if you can. Question didn't really ask what it was you were asking, and playing this big game. I was like, this is bullshit, to be quite frank, and I know we're being taken for it. So that's not truth. Hide and seek is not truth. So I was floored by that. So what I'm suggesting to new lawyers to try to stay and do what they're supposed to do. Oh, but we have to protect our client's interest. Well, it's like, if your client's a liar and we can find out he's a liar, then we're going to prove he's a liar. Okay. but don't hide the truth. So that really was something that really burned my butt because I just didn't think was right.
Yeah. So truth telling cures and addresses a lot of issues with respect to professional responsibility. No doubt. Another area involves civility and whether I'll throw out several questions and you can choose which are subject matter topics and you can choose which ones to address. Are we doing better with it? Are we doing worse with it? And how do you balance zealous representation versus cooperation when it comes to our interaction?
Yeah. Well, I mean, common people, they say, how do you lawyers end up fighting so hard in court and then go out and have a beer afterwards? I think that we are doing fairly well with civility because I think as attorneys and colleagues, we're kind and cordial to one another. You don't have to like somebody to be civil and courteous. You don't have to like them at all, as a matter of fact. And so, but civility and courtesy, I think, is by the majority of people I've been involved with, we're there. I think that there are times when people get angered, and I'm probably, I can be a little hothead too, but as I've gotten older, I've tried to moderate that because it doesn't do any good, because then you get into a pissing match and that never solves anything. So with the advent of mediation, and that has been a biggie because I do mediation and family law a lot, and I've done some civil mediations. We're taught, if we take these kind of CLE courses, how to better manage one another's personalities. But I'll tell you a story real quick. I had a case one time where deposition going on. It was a big case. It was a really big case. It was against the I-team. And the two lawyers that were in there, all of a sudden they were going to throw down. I'm not kidding you. I'm cracking up, but they want to throw down. They're going to go, let's take it out in the hall. And I'm like, seriously? I just kind of sat there shaking my head going, these two people are threatening each other and they want to go out in the hall and fist fight. And I'm like, this is crazy. That's an anomaly, to be quite frank, but it's happened. So we need to stay courteous to one another. As my mother always said, kill them with kindness. Get more flies with, sugar than you do shit. Seriously, it's the reality and common sense type things that we as lawyers should treat one another with civility. We need to respond to our calls. We need to respond to our emails, and we need to communicate and don't let things pile up. It's really those kinds of issues that lawyers deal with. When they don't respond and they don't do their work, then they get in trouble. And so the best advice older lawyers can give younger lawyers is do your work and don't ignore people because you don't like them. I know. And it's like and don't ignore the case file that's the dog sitting on your desk, where you push it from one side to another side going, oh, I just can't stand this case. I can't stand these people. And you push it from side to side to side. Don't do that, because those are the kinds of things that will bite you in the butt, and you don't need that.
In terms of managing work-life balance, I know you've been a mom, you've been involved in the community and led your law practice. I don't know, for some of us, when we think about work-life balance, at some point it kind of all melds together, being an attorney and trying to help the community. And if you're involved in your kid's sport, there's a good chance you'll be asked to coach. So it all just kind of blends together. And you feel like, are you really working 60 hours a week, or are you actually just living your life 60 hours a week? And I was curious about your perspective on so-called work-life balance.
Well, I think when I was younger, it took me almost to be 50 years old before I finally got some sense to myself, because I think I worked a lot. And But working and being involved is also business development, because you have to remember you're always a lawyer, sort of like you're always a lawyer like 24 hours a day, because you could go to a party and nobody there is a client of yours, but if they find out you're a lawyer, they ask you questions. I mean, that happens all the time. But I think that it's something that comes with aging. And I see a lot of the young people, I have two granddaughters now too. And I mean, I'm a participant in pickup delivery in the school line, so it's what I have found since I turned 50, and I'm going to be 70, the last 20 years of my life now, I have been much calmer. I have been I do meditation. I'm more into peacefulness. I try to steer clear of craziness. I know, but the law practice is crazy. So the most likely time I'm crazy is when I'm around the law practice. But I'm able to divorce a little bit from it now and try to be a little bit calmer. I take more time away. I spent a whole winter in Florida working during Zoom. I had never been away from Florence, Kentucky or Northern Kentucky that long in my life. I'm trying to do more traveling now. So what my suggestion for younger lawyers is take the time to enjoy your kiddos when they're little, because guess what? In a blink of an eye, they're 52 years old and 40 years old. And so you just want to try to find a middle ground, plug into Claire Parsons and her mindfulness, because that's a kiddo I've known since she was born. And she's just setting the world on fire, helping people learn how to calm. I don't know that anybody could have told me that before I was 50 years old, to be quite frank. I would have probably blown them off and think they were crazy. But I have learned that it's important to be calm if you can, and peaceful if you can, because your health depends upon it. And I am a great believer of exercise. I mean, I am older now, and it's a little bit harder for me to get out and walk my 2 miles. It really is, because you age and you just think, seriously, is this really happening? But it is. And I just think calmness, peacefulness, and it is really something that we need as lawyers need to strive to do, and quit drinking so much, and quit, lawyers like to drink. I quit drinking 20 years ago. I quit smoking 20 years ago. So I think the last 20 years I've become a much more sane individual.
Well, what are some of the biggest successes, sources of satisfaction outside the practice of law for you?
The joy of my two great nieces and my two grandbabies. I don't even know before 50 years old if I even knew what the word joy was. Seriously. And I find great joy in the fact that my girls, I'm their go-go, and I love being their go-go, and I love being with them. The problem now is some of them are hitting the teen years, and then they don't have time for mommy and daddy, much less go-go and Nana and Papa and everybody else. So, it's just life. So it's like learning that life is full of joy if we look for it. Naked pink lady flowers are my favorite. They come up Fair Week every August of my life. They are up right now. I find joy in seeing them. It's just the simple things. And Rob, I'm so appreciative of this opportunity, to be quite frank. And this is so unreal for me to be emotional, but I'm an old broad now. I can if I want. But this is touching to me to be able to say to you all, you people out there that I love and adore, many of you, and some I don't even know. Anytime I can help you, all you have to do is ask. I will help point you in the right direction. I will tell you, please do not reinvent the wheel. It is crazy. Please be nice to the clerks, because they help us if we ask them and treat them nice. Just be kind to one another. Life is short. Life is short. So enjoy it while it's here, and share your wealth of knowledge and share your wealth of money to help others. That's kind of like where I am.
is there anything that that's not widely known about you that may be amusing or interesting that you care to share? You've been pretty open so far. There might not be anything else, but
No.
no.
I do have guns. I do have guns.
Well, that's good.
I mean, I'm all about, I mean, I am somewhat obviously liberally bent, but I am not far extreme left, and I am clearly fighting against far extreme right. But I'm trying, but I'm a gun owner, and I think people should have guns, but I definitely don't believe that we need military style guns in the hands of crazy people.
Well, we're coming to the close of the program, and as a final question, and then I'll see what we have out there on chat and Q&A. Any additional words of wisdom for the next generation of lawyers in Northern Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati?
Good luck.
Good luck. Yes, but it can also make for a wonderful life when everything comes together the way it can and should. And you certainly had that. And I wanted to thank you for all you've done for our community, our lawyers in the community. And let me move to chat and Q&A here. I see something in chat, but it says, I was working for Deanna as a new lawyer and working on the Funk appeal is where I met you. And this is Stephanie, if I can pull the names. Oh, it's Stephanie Dietz. Yeah, so she just wanted to talk about how she met you, and I don't know if you have any memories from the Funk appeal that Stephanie wanted to chat about.
But Stephanie was a new lawyer. I mean, she was brand new, and that's the good part of being old. A lot of the people who I now practice law with regularly, I've known since they were young lawyers and watched their practices grow and their successes grow. And the Funk case was one of the big cases that I worked with Deanna Dennison on, and the fact that we saved a man's life was that's another big deal in my lifetime. Sometimes when that happens, it's just it just impresses upon you the importance of being a lawyer when you're advocating on particularly in the criminal cases where someone's life is hanging in the balance. That's a very important. But yeah, I appreciate Stephanie saying that. I've known her a long time.
Well, Margo, again, can't thank you enough for being a part of the Legends series and for your guidance for Northern Kentucky's new and future lawyers. Special thanks again to the attendees today. We genuinely appreciate your support. For all of you, our amazing Executive Director, Julie Jones, is going to be sending you CLE information for ethics credits. And everyone keep in mind, send your suggestions. We hope this program will continue into 2023, and there are plenty of great lawyers out there who have messages for the next generations of lawyers. We're always better, of course, when we work together and we collaborate with one another. Everybody just have a terrific day. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.